Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be with you here once again. Tonight, we have our special guest, Adam Coleman, the author of Black Victim to Black Victor. I want to make sure I get that right. The full title is Black Victim to Black Victor, Identifying Ideologies, Behavioral Patterns, and Cultural Norms that Encourage a Victimhood Complex, which I think is a fantastic thesis, and we're really going to kind of get into it. Adam's been pretty busy lately. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but he was recently talking to Vivek Ramaswamy. Got to make sure I get the pronunciation correct. Who is running for the GOP nomination for president in 2024. He founded Wrong Speak Publications. He's an author and columnist, and he writes with Substack and similar. He says he's working on a New York Post piece about Vivek. Oh my gosh,
Vivek.
I'm going to struggle. Thank you, Adam. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
It takes me like 4 times to figure something out. But Adam, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Staying
Awesome.
busy, like you said.
Cool beans. Yeah, what have you been up to lately?
Well, writing for the New York Post, I basically do weekly, once or twice a week, provide an article. Wrong Speak has been, slowly growing. We're working on the book publishing side. So I have one author that I signed, and we're just working on getting his book structured to get published. And that's going to be a whole different venture to see how that works out. I'll be working for a new publication coming out soon. I don't know if I'm allowed to say anything, but I believe the soft launch is supposed to be April 1st. So I need to also have a couple of articles written by April 1st.
Jeez.
So, and I'm also still a columnist for Human Events. I write almost every week. So I'm writing 4, 5, sometimes 6 times a week. So I'm writing a lot, and I'm doing public speaking. I just went to Minnesota to do a public speaking event for Turning Points. And I'll be all over the place. One other thing, I'm going to London into April. I'll be there for 5 nights, meeting up with a whole bunch of people. I'll be on Talk TV while I'm out there, and just seeing some friends that I've met through Twitter.
That's amazing. That sounds like a ton of fun. You are a very busy man. So what have the focuses been of most of your articles lately? Is there like a theme?
So I will say that healthily criticizing the right.
Cool.
I'll just be 100% frank. When I came back from actually the event that we met each other, for Turning Points, America Fest in December, one of the things that I didn't like was one of many things that I didn't like. I felt like it was like this big rally call of nothingness. I was there 4 days and listened to just about every speaker, if not every speaker, to be honest with you. And I heard nothing for the vast majority of them. I heard no strategy. I heard no way of winning. I heard loose advice. Go out there and make babies and get married. I mean, that okay.
Yeah, that's good, I guess.
It's good, I guess. And I just heard no real hope. I heard a lot of big words. I heard people saying, we should fight the deep state and take them down. Well, how exactly do you do that? Oh, they don't tell you that part. Just subscribe to them and give them more money and buy their stuff. And I heard a whole lot of nothingness. And it's actually something that I got used to hearing a whole lot of nothingness from the left, right? There's just tons of word salads and and a whole lot of nothingness. And people can notice, like, when people on the left say a lot of stuff that means absolutely nothing. Kamala Harris is really good at that. But when the right does the same thing, they say a whole lot of stuff that means really nothing. No sort of rally call, no sort of strategy. This is how you do it. And on top of that, no hope, very little positivity. And I'm just like, you guys are leading people to failure. And so that's when I kind of felt like it took me a couple weeks afterwards, but that's when I felt like I need to actually find more of a way to, from like a caring standpoint, not like a bad faith standpoint, criticize the right, because not enough of them criticize themselves. And I feel like, as someone who's messed up a lot in my life, the times I've gotten better was when someone pointed it out, or I stopped the bad behavior and corrected it, and then I got better. And politically, I feel like there's an apparatus that wants the status quo. They pretend
Mm.
that they want change and different, but they do the same thing over and over, the same playbook over and over. And even more so, one last thing I'll say is, even more so, for people to understand, I used to be a Democrat. So for years, I listened to Democrats speak, liberals speak. I know what they sound like. I know the words they use. And now I'm listening to majority, the right, and they sound exactly the same.
Mm.
It's just that people who spend their entire life on one side never truly hear how the other side speaks. And they have so much in common that it's funny. And the same type of rhetoric, the same rally cry, you just swap a noun and it's the same stuff. And I'm just like, there are so many negative apparatuses here that are leading the right to failure.
I think you are in exactly the right place, and it kind of feels like you've been reading my mind, because I've also been saying this, and I actually kind of got into this, I think, quite a while ago with Benjamin Boyce. He was one of the first interviews I did while I was still producing for Timcast IRL. I was saying that conservatism, not the right as a whole, but the ideas behind conservatism are so compelling and so hopeful. There is no excuse for the way the right wing is presenting them. There is no reason that they're not unbelievably appealing and hopeful and empowering. But the way we're presenting them is just boring. First of all, it does sound like a whole bunch of nothing. We do have very polished figureheads. Sure, maybe we need those. I've actually been arguing with, people who follow me. I'm like, I feel like we don't need celebrities. We probably shouldn't focus on celebrity culture. We need leaders who are maybe rough around the edges, not super polished, who don't always sound great, but who really, really push our messages in a meaningful way and live the values they say they're promoting. And I think that
Mhm.
sounds like exactly where you're at after TPUSA. I think that TPUSA is a good way to meet awesome people like you. I got to meet a whole bunch of people who follow me. I got to work with Andy's. He had a company like booth over there that was really fun to work with. But I did leave with a lot more questions than I went in with, because everything was very polished and everything was just a couple minutes. Like, it was almost like a TV spot where you'd only have 3 minutes to discuss exactly what you thought. And as we know, that's not enough time to really convey some of the deep ideas, like really impart the significance of conservative thought. So, how do you
Mhm.
think we can improve our approach to all this stuff generally?
Generally, one, you have to stop the purity tests, um, because whoever is the one who dictates the purity test that's what you're going to get.
Gatekeeper.
And they're the gatekeepers, and we have a lot of that. One of my friends is a former congressional candidate, and she talks about, oh my God, like, if regular people knew the level of gatekeeping that happens within the Republican Party, they'd be shocked.
Hmm.
Um, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that happens. And I think the gatekeeping of ideas, like right now, the gatekeeping revolves around either you're with Trump or not with Trump. And so that's the gatekeeping apparatus. So if you have like any sort of criticism about Trump, oh, you're what they call a never Trumper. You're a never Trumper. It's like I can't I the idea that you can't criticize the most powerful man in the country without being labeled as being anti is absurd. It's absolutely absurd. And I think there are purity tests that happen on the left and the right. And the right, I think, sometimes is blind to realize that they're purity testing people the same way that the people that they criticize all the time. Um, I think we have to stop that. The second thing I would say is we have to stop putting people, figureheads, influencers, and politicians on a pedestal. Um, they are flawed. All of them are flawed.
Of
I'm
course.
flawed.
Yeah.
And stop doing that, because otherwise you start making excuses. You gloss over their mistakes. You gloss over this, and they don't get better. And I think that, and this isn't a right or left thing, but I think we've been losing the ability to lovingly criticize our own.
Yeah, I
Because
think you're right.
yeah, like if you care about someone, like I use the example of my son. If my son is doing the wrong thing all the time and I just watch him fail and I say nothing to him, that's not an act of love because I want to protect his feelings. It's an act of malice that I'm letting it happen. And that's what I see here within politics, is that we have flawed people and we don't criticize them because we're afraid of these purity tests, or we're afraid of making this person look bad. And it's like, no, you criticize them because you want them to get better if you actually care about them.
That's a great point. And that is certainly something I've been seeing too. I actually got to the point there was so much arguing and so much dissent that sometimes I admit I will turn off some comments on my tweets because I'm like, I'm not interested in having the same argument I've had 100 times before. I just want everyone to be aware of this fact about certain political figures. And I
Mm-hmm.
think what this boils down to maybe is that we need a way to rally people without being tribal. Now, I
Right.
think that libertarianism takes that too far. They
Mm-hmm.
emphasize individuality too much, and there's no coherent party. Now, I respect a lot of libertarian ideas, and I fully respect the ideas of individuality and the pursuit of liberty. But if you want to make a political difference, then you need to have a few core ideas that you agree on pretty much 100%. And I remember when I was younger, I really thought that the right had that down really well. But
Mm-hmm.
ever since Trump, and whether it's his fault or not, whether he really is just a symptom of the system or whatever, I've seen that kind of fragment because people are willing to put their values on hold. People who I
Right.
used to think cared deeply about families and about fidelity and about, the sanctity of marriage are willing to throw it away to defend somebody like Trump who's been really bad about that. Now, for me, I've always said I'm going to criticize every single politician that I see having any kind of issue with pushing the ideas that I want to see out there because I do not worship them. They work for
Mm-hmm.
me at the end of the day. If they are federal, if they're not even in my state, I won't really worry about them too much. But politicians work for us. They aren't celebrities. And part of the trouble we're seeing now is the making politicians into celebrities that kind of was emphasized really strongly with Obama. I think was
Mm-hmm.
really the biggest place we started to see this, and has only gotten worse since then. I think you're entirely correct about wanting to hold people accountable. How do we hold politicians accountable without drawing everyone's anger? Is there even a way to do that?
So my strategy has always been to criticize the behavior and the ideas more so than the person. So as someone who's really big into psychology, human behavior, um, and just general, like I care about good ideas, good rhetoric, stuff like that. I explain why this behavior is bad, not why this person is bad. And I try to be fair in that way, even if it's someone I just adamantly disagree with. Like, I've read a lot about progressives, but the reason I write a lot about progressives and criticize them is because, one, I listen to progressive content for quite a while. So I have a really good understanding of what they mean and what they're saying. And just about everything that they advocate for results in the opposite effect. And I've gone to the depths of like analyzing them psychologically as well, their type of attitude, the elitism that many of them exude, not all of them, but a lot of them, the class element, all of these different things. I'm talking about everything except for the person themselves, because I try to do that because I think people can change, and I try to leave room that this person has the ability to change, or maybe this person has some room where we could find some common ground. Like Kathy Holcomb, Democrat, you would think, oh, establishment Democrat, blah 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 blah. Guess what? She's advocating for bail reform in New York. and she's advocating for more charter schools in New York.
Oh, that's great.
Democrat, I'll take it.
Yeah.
You know, so and she's battling her own party, who are really highly supported by the unions, especially the teachers unions, to push forth something that actually benefits people, and it's common sense. These people actually want it within the city, and throughout the state, but especially within New York City. So um, I think we should focus on criticizing bad ideas, bad strategy, bad behavior. Criticize those things and make it less personal.
That's a great strategy. I really like that actually. And I don't care what people think about Ben Shapiro because I appreciate his approach, especially when it came to Trump. He had a segment
Mhm.
that he liked to call Good Trump, Bad Trump. And he said, you criticize Trump when he does something wrong and you praise him when he does something good. It's as simple as that. And people were not okay with that because they're like, it doesn't matter what Trump does. He's the man. The state hates him. And it's like, he still needs to be held to account. I'm sorry. I'm glad that
Right.
he's sticking it to, the deep state or whatever. But at the same time, he can still make mistakes. And to be fair, when he was first elected, he had zero political experience. So he was probably somewhat naive about how efficient he was going to be about draining the swamp. But
Mhm.
I think that most people tend to discard that, which is frustrating to watch. I don't know why that is because the right, pardon me, has been traditionally less tribal than the left because we have been more focused on individuality and the importance of the role of the individual over the role of tribes. Now, the left, you could argue, has been more effective because they have been more tribal. You won't see Democrats in the federal halls be out of step with one another. They tend to be fully in lockstep pretty much all the time. And if some of them do dissent, they will be seriously admonished by leaders like Nancy Pelosi. I don't know if anybody remembers, but AOC was getting a little bit uppity, according to Nancy Pelosi, and she got her back in line in no time. Now, whatever you say about Nancy Pelosi, she does know what she's doing and she does keep her people in line. But there's an element there of that tribal identity that the right kind of tends to lack. Do you think we should push the tribal identity with the right, or should we stay away from it, even though it might make us more effective politically?
I'd say you should stay away from it. Um, I don't think that the left wins because they're more tribal. I think they win because they're way better at messaging. Um, Generally speaking, they're better at messaging than the right is. They're good at messaging bad ideas.
Hmm.
That tells you like how important messaging is. Um, I've seen them frame like terrible stuff as a thing that we should all galvanize and get behind. Um, Whereas, I've always said that the right has great ideas, terrible implementation, terrible messaging. It's as simple as that. I use the example of immigration. The right has allowed the left to narrate what the right thinks of immigration, and they've played into it as well. So it becomes either immigration is about racism, because they just don't want more brown people in the country, or immigration is some fiscal situation. That's not how you win people about having stronger borders. How you
Hmm.
win them is to point out that this is a humanitarian crisis. You win them by saying there's human trafficking happening at our borders, where there are women who are being raped. We'll use the friendly term,
Yes, yes. Assaulted,
um,
yeah.
assaulted, and children who are being abducted. You have legitimate human tragedy that is happening at the southern border, and there are safety issues as well. So for American citizens, so you frame it on a very like a not a personal level, but like on a human level,
Yes.
because that's what people respond to. People respond to stories. People respond to human events, right? You can get people like look at Australia. Australia got people to turn in their guns because of a human tragedy. One single event got people to turn in their guns
Mm.
over a human tragedy. That's how you actually get stuff done. You make it a human element. You don't turn it into ones and zeros and try to make some sort of arbitrary argument over why something, this is good and this is bad, and let's have a debate over this. Like, no, you frame it. We talk about the left has propaganda. The right has to create effective propaganda too. That's how, unfortunately, that's how you have to do stuff.
Yeah.
And if you can frame it in a way that touches people, right, not just your base, that touches people, that's how you can actually get stuff done. That's how you can change people's minds.
I think you're correct about immigration as well. I'm going to try not to agree with you on everything on today's podcast, but I do, because I remember in, I want to say like 2018 or 2019, I had a friend who was planning to vote for Hillary, or no, it must have been earlier than that, huh? It must have been like 2015. Wow, that was a long time ago. Geez, time gets away from me. She was really considering voting for Hillary because her whole, Hispanic family was thinking about it. Now, she and I got into it. She had a young daughter. We didn't get into it. We didn't fight or argue, but I was really trying to tailor the message of immigration to her. And that's exactly what I told her. I said, look, I know you care very, very much about your daughter, and I think she's wonderful, and I would hate for anything to ever happen to her. And I felt a little bit sleazy for doing it, because I was then like, you know what is happening at the border is human trafficking. They are taking advantage of children. They are passing them to coyotes, and they're putting them in harm's way consistently. And I know that you don't want that to happen to people because you're a good person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of felt like I was emotionally blackmailing her, but at the same time, I was talking to a woman, right? I understood that this was how you put it into human terms. You have to. And I think that Republicans and conservatives in general might feel a little bit sleazy about doing that, but at the same time, you have to know your audience, okay? And I feel like the right might not understand their audiences maybe as much as the left does. Now, Scott Adams is constantly talking about how Democrats don't understand human motivations. And I think that's probably true, but they do understand the importance of words on the psychology of people. And this is why they're changing words just ever so slightly, ever so slowly, changing what we can say, and thus changing our impression of these things. And I will use the example here of gender affirming care. We know that's not what that looks like. That is horrible, visceral, bloody surgery. And they are trying to phrase it in such a way that it's acceptable. It's on par with reproductive health. These are pseudonyms for things that they know they can't say and sell it to people. They are putting them into very nice, very warm, very comforting terms. You care about reproductive health. Don't you care about gender affirming care? Don't you want to be affirmative and nice? They understand that changing the words that you use actually does change your outlook on the world. Now, I don't think that conservatives understand that at all. This is something that psychologists actually do fully understand. They say you need to look at the world and tell yourself things about the world that allow you to engage with it in a more productive way. And this is like a little bit of the stoic vein of being like, okay, so you control your perspective. So you're going to tell yourself things that help you tackle the world in a stronger way. And I think that Republicans desperately need to internalize that, because until they do, they are going to continue to lose the battle of public perception. And that is probably the biggest battle, which is frustrating to me, because I happen to think that conservative values are incredibly attractive, but they're never worded properly. They're never conveyed, like you were saying, in terms of human engagement. So what is one area you think that we can amp up the human engagement and get people to see the more conservative point of view?
An area that we can ramp up the engagement, see the conservative view. I don't know. That's a difficult question to answer, actually.
Well, I would say immigration. Honestly, I think that's a great example. I think that example that you gave already is perfect.
I was trying to think of something else.
Yeah.
Maybe in areas of race.
Ooh, good point. Like what, for example?
So, all right. So if we're going to go in the topic of race,
Let's do it.
I have to frame it in this way. One of my issues with the right, and I think the left does it as well sometimes too, is that when the left does something, their immediate reaction is to either do the opposite or deny that it is happening, whatever the left says. So if the left says there is systemic racism, their immediate reaction is to deny that there's systemic racism.
Yeah.
Right. And so we play this kind of cat and mouse game, but the reality is we should actually not just automatically deny what you're saying, but we should pick apart what you're saying. We should highlight areas where they might be telling the truth and then reframe it to the way that reality actually is. So or force them to actually answer the question. That's like force them to explain, what do you mean by this?
Yes.
Right. You can't just throw out systemic racism and just keep it moving. What do you mean by that? In which way? And then that's when you see them fall apart. Not to deviate from race, but like that's what made Matt Walsh's documentary brilliant, is because he let them explain themselves and it fell apart. And regular people could sit there and watch it and be like, oh, this is all garbage, because they can't even explain it.
Right.
But on the topic of race, the left has some points. They don't have the whole point. So if something was like, for example, the situation with George Floyd, it's an unfortunate incident that occurred, but this incident is an isolated incident. And at most you could say there are issues maybe within policing within Minneapolis.
Yeah.
That's the farthest that you can actually go. And there may actually be some truth to that, because I've heard of some sort of issues historically with the Minneapolis Police Department. That is the leeway that you could give. And then you stop it right there and say, but everything else is garbage. And here's why, and kind of explain it. But we're not willing to do that when we just deny that there's a possibility that there is an issue. And so, I try to think of it from perspective, like if I'm a 21-year-old college student about to graduate and I turn on the television and there's cops with a knee on the neck and cops doing this, and there's a riot here and a riot there, and I don't have the life experience like other people do, my thought pattern is it's not irrational to think that there might be a problem. And so you're like, I'm seeing all these things on my TV, there must be a problem. And someone says, there is zero problem, there's no problem. Then you're not really galvanizing people, because you're not even trying to reassure them that there, okay, there might be something. You're not
crazy.
Yeah, you're not crazy. There might be something here, but let's talk about there's none of that. The only person I saw who did something like that was Rand Paul. Rand Paul tried to put through the no-knock, getting rid of no-knock warrants and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that was sort of an admission, like, yeah, this is a problem. It might affect certain people more than others. That was the right strategy. And then I see people do the complete opposite, and they're not nuanced about it. And also, just one other thing, in perspective of race, I think it is a terribly losing strategy to tell Black people to not see themselves as Black, because there have been studies about this. White Americans don't see themselves as white automatically. They usually go to some historical heritage. I just talked to your husband about being German, right? You have a foreign nation, as far as Americans go, you have a foreign nation that you can point towards, or a lineage that you can point towards. For Black Americans, they see being Black very similar to how we acknowledge that he's German. Acknowledging that he's German didn't make him less American.
Right.
It's just talking about, yeah, this is a piece of your history, your family lineage. But what's happened is the reaction game has said, you must deny that race is being Black for Black people is at all important. And when Black people say, well, it is important to me, and there's actually nothing wrong with it, just because it's important to me, doesn't mean I'm racist, doesn't mean I hate you, doesn't mean I'm because there are historical reasons why they're fine with it, they're proud of it. And I think we play the deny game when it comes to that, and it doesn't help. And so then what ends up happening is, for someone like myself, within my book, I tried to say that make race less important, because it opens up to you being manipulated by other people. just like any other if you make conservatism the number one thing in your life, it opens you up to be manipulated by other people who call themselves conservatives.
Right.
It's the same thing. So you make these group identities less important. But I don't tell Black people not to see themselves as Black. I think that's a ridiculous venture. And I see conservatives going down that line of, why does race even matter? But if you were to say to them, why does your national heritage or your family's heritage matter to you? You don't deny that. They don't understand that.
Yeah, to use a not exactly 100% parallel, but it would be like kind of like telling women that their experience as females is not as significant as they think it is. First of all,
Right.
you can't tell someone else how they feel. I really, really don't like this kind of mind reading, because people will try to tell me what I really think or what I'm really trying to say. So this is the Jordan Peterson, Kathy Griffin interview where she's like, so what you're saying is, no, what I'm saying is exactly what I'm saying. And I find myself super frustrated with the limitations of language, because I can't fully express exactly what I'm thinking. I know exactly what I'm thinking, and I'm usually pretty good about telling people how I'm feeling, but I mess up too. Like, you see this in a married relationship a lot. You're like, well, that wasn't really what I was actually thinking or feeling, but the way I said it made it look like I thought other than I did, which I hate. But at the same time, I think you're entirely correct about conservatives dismissing an integral part of an identity. But at the same time, we can't let identities run our lives. It needs to be a component of our views of one another as complete human beings. Like, you talk about St. Patrick's Day, you talk about having pride in being Irish, but then conservatives will just turn around and be like, well, no, you're not allowed to take any kind of, pride or confidence in your lineage if you're not Irish, I guess. It's kind of a strange thing. But there is a little bit of a double standard there, I think. But that could also just be the right-wing reactionary response, is saying, no,
Yes.
there is no significance to you being from this background at all. We can only focus on this stuff. Well, maybe humans have this, slightly larger view of themselves than just, I am an individual, et cetera, et cetera. There are things that make you the person you are that aren't just your own personal brain or your personal actual parenting upbringing. There's a lot of factors that make a person. And I think conservatives would do well to recognize that people are constellations of everything that affects them. And there's just so much room for improvement. It's hard to say exactly where to start with that one, but I do like the idea of recognizing the grain of truth. So this to circle back a little bit, you were talking about how there's often a little bit of truth in these left-wing arguments, and that is, I've always thought that was slightly malign, because it's entirely correct. There's often a tiny bit of truth in each of these arguments. But, and I will blame social media and TV for this one, it's very, very difficult to unpack that with any degree of nuance, because we expect 30 seconds, 5 seconds. We expect really, really fast responses. No, you're wrong. Smack it down. It's kind of like whack-a-mole. And then you get the easy win, you get the dopamine rush, and you move on. It's not how it works. That's not how you change hearts and minds. You need to be able to convey nuance in about 30 seconds, which is incredibly difficult. I think that's probably something you've been working on with some of your speaking and stuff, but we need to emphasize the importance of recognizing that nuance and then being able to communicate it. We need to be really good communicators, whatever direction we're coming from as far as conservatism. As far as just being sane and rational and not crazy leftists, we need to excel at communicating. Just because we're playing a little bit of catch up with the left, who knows how important words are in shaping reality in ways that we apparently refuse to admit. I've always had a really hard time with people who refuse to accept reality. And I used to talk about this in my teens. When I was first learning to drive, I would drive with friends and the light would turn green. And then they'd be like, all right, I'm going to go now. I'm like, okay, the car in front of you is not moving yet, so it doesn't matter that the light's green. I'm sorry. Right. You're still going to have to wait. And I see this running into reality on the left, but I also see it from the right. The left tends to run into the wall when it comes to undeniable facts about the way humans have worked for millions of years. They
Hmm.
deny it about marriage. They deny it about the importance of, a two-parent household. But the right tends to do it when it comes to some of the factors outside of just pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. We tend to think that people are just going to be able to buckle down and make things happen no matter what else is going on in their lives. Now, you might have to do that in wartime, like World War II, the greatest generation, truly exemplary people. But at the same time, you cannot deny people's experiences and you cannot deny how much those can affect them. You need to
Hmm.
understand that humans are complete packages and we need to address each part of it. We can't just ignore their feelings just because we think facts don't care about your feelings, because your feelings very much care about your feelings, and they're going to nullify a lot of these facts if you don't convey them in the correct way. So
Hmm.
I'm optimistic that your kind of mindset is going to push this idea that we need to understand people as complex beings. Now,
Yeah.
with the focus of your book, you seem to be assigning a lot of responsibility for people to kind of do some of the culture changing. What is the biggest area you see that people are really able to take on personal responsibility and empower the communities around them to do the same? Is it like parenting and fatherhood, or is it like reaching out to the immediate community with school boards, or how do you think is the best way for individuals to make this happen?
So the root of everything for me is family. So, like, if I'm to continue to criticize the right, I understand the need to go to the school board and fight for your children to be in school and do all these different things. I think that's a good thing. So it's not me complaining about it. But I think we've come to the point where it is our expectation that the state is responsible to teach our children the way that we think that they should teach. So we'll fight tooth and nail to make sure that the school teaches exactly what we want them to teach. Where I'm saying, well, why don't you teach them yourself?
Ooh.
Like, granted, I'm not saying that, and I'm not trying to be one of those people like, okay, everybody's kids should be homeschooled.
Yeah.
Not everybody can. We just started homeschooling my son this past year. Although he's older, he's 17. Um, but if there's critical information, you teach them about it. Also, the other thing is the woke nonsense is going to take a while to come out of schools. I think a lot of the woke stuff is going to be a trend. Um, and it's going to come to a point where the trend runs out and it's not going to be feasible anymore. That's my personal belief. But in the meantime, it's going to cause damage. What conservative parents are doing a disservice with if they don't prepare their kids for it. So they need to tell their kids, if you're in school and you hear your teacher say X, Y, and Z, tell me. Or tell them, like, if they say this, that's not true because of this. Provide them with books, provide them with reading, different types of materials. Prepare them for the nonsense that they may incur. And not every school is woke. So, you know, certain schools are, certain ones aren't. Some of them are just bad schools that just
Mm,
suck.
yeah.
Um, my son's school was a bad school. I wouldn't say it was completely woke. It had aspects where that people try to come in there and preach certain things, but outside of that, it was just a bad school. Um, so I think conservatives and all parents, because this is actually not just a conservative fight, there are a lot of liberals who do not like this stuff. This is a progressive movement. This is an infiltration by progressives to get the rest of society to change. Moderate
Mm,
Democrats do not like this stuff too. Fairfax
right.
County in Virginia is an example of that. Um, so we need to prepare our kids for the BS that they may experience, just like we would prepare them for anything else, just like we would prepare them for stranger danger and all this other stuff. We need to prepare them for ideological danger. We need to have them ready and tell them the words that these people are going to use. And now we're in the position to do that. Whereas I think during COVID, a lot of parents were blindsided by this stuff, which is why there was such a reaction to it. They took their eye off the ball, and they just assume that their kids will go to school and get a relatively decent education.
Yeah, we cannot assume that anymore. That's definitely the case. And I have been similarly frustrated with the way that parents are just willing to turn their kids over to the state of all institutions that fails at everything from the post office to the DMV to everything they touch. They just turn them over and they're like, oh, it'll be fine. I don't have to worry about it. And then when they come home, they can watch TV and do their homework and then they go to bed. I don't have to worry about being a parent. I always just want to say, stop, stop, stop. What are you doing? Like, you're literally reproducing yourself and then just saying, here, state, do whatever you want with them. I don't really care about them, apparently. That's always shocked me and kind of grossed me out. So I am glad that conservatives are like, you know what, we need to take it right to the school board. And my mom, I remember when I was really young, she would go to there was a Christian school in town, and she was very involved with that board. She thought that was really important, and I was really happy to see that in hindsight, because I was like, that is important. Even though we didn't even go to the school, she thought it was really important to be involved and to know what they were doing, like what they're up to, first of all, because she was planning to homeschool us at that point, I'm pretty sure. I'm just like, okay, I want to see how they do this. And then I want to have a say in, you know, how kids are taught in general, because that's like a cultural impact that you can have even if your kids don't go to that school. Now, I know people might argue with me about that, but it was just a way that my mom was involved in the culture. And I thought that was really, really kind of important, because she went to a Christian school and she said, even though you're a Christian school, I know that you can be as good as humanly possible. Even though you're a Christian school, I'm not going to let you get by just doing whatever you want to do because you have the word Christian in your name. And I really appreciated that about what she did. Now, I think that the right has tended to be very black-pilled lately. So I want to take the last part of the show and talk about all of the ways that things are going positive. So you're doing great stuff. I'm really working hard on this little podcast. It's growing at a relatively steady rate. What are some things that are giving you signs of hope as we go into the spring season?
You know, I would say Vivek running for office.
Right. So yes, talk about that.
So, you know, Vivek has been, you know, as I'm talking, I'm like literally in the middle of writing my article for the New York Post about it. But the way I'm thinking of it is, we've watched so many people be afraid to take risks within the past few years. A lot of people being scared to do something because they might lose their job and this and that. Or they're just generally comfortable. So they just want to stay quiet and just, you know, just keep it going. And someone like Vivek, very similar to me, just risked it and just said, I'm going to say what I want to say. I didn't ask my employer if I could write my book. I just did it. And I was willing to deal with any possible repercussions, and nothing negative came in my direction from it. Because I truly do believe that the fear is greater than the possibility of getting canceled and fired and all this stuff. We always focus on the horror stories, but is it likely? I don't think it's nearly as likely as people make it seem. But someone like Vivek, who was on track to be, you know, a billionaire before 30, and you know, all he had to do was just sit on top of the CEO position, keep doing what he's been doing. And he said, I like speaking out, and I'm going to resign from my position to speak. And that's literally how his journey started. And I think him running for office is a sign. I think it'll teach people to take that risk. He knows that he's not a stupid person. He's one of the most competent people that I've ever met in person. He knows that there's a risk. He knows that there's a long shot. He knows what the hurdles are, and he is learning along the way, because this is new to him, you know, running for office. But the thing is, we need to have more risk takers in our society. The risk takers are the people who reap the rewards. Safe people don't. You know, should there be some safety? Do we expect every person to take some sort of risk? No. Is there a balance? Yes. We don't want people to become, you know, blackjack players and just throw away their lives left and right. What I'm saying is, when there's a moment of importance, when there's some sort of calling, and you feel that maybe you should actually do it. And I can just imagine someone like Vivek hearing all the people saying, "No, no, no, you should wait till 2028. No, 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 you should actually run for this office." And he's saying, "What I want to do." First off, Vivek is younger than me. He's
Mm.
37,
Wow.
and the man has been winning his entire life. What makes you think that he thinks that he can't possibly do this? Like, he has the competency, he has the intelligence, he has the know-how. He just lacks the experience because it's the first time he's running for office. But what makes you think that he's just going to be like, yeah, you're right, I'm just going to pack it up and go home? He is a risk taker. He is the company that he was CEO of, he built. That was his company. He didn't
Right.
just, he didn't have rich parents who knew this guy and then wound up in the board and became CEO. He created a company that he became the CEO of, and turned it into $1 billion corporation. And he risked it, left that position just to speak. And I think there is something that's admirable about that. And I think more people should take that leap of faith, should take that risk. So my positive thing, and I'm still working on the article to, for so people can learn a little bit more about Vivek. But I think my takeaway from him is that he's that glimmer of just try, just go for it, because you never know what may come from it.
I think that's a message that's really actually going to resound with people, especially right now, because as you were talking about that, I was thinking two things. First of all, he is an example of merit. So he is a self made person who didn't
Mm-hmm.
take outside investment and who chose to do his own thing, built his company, and now he's expanding it, which I think is great. More power to him. I'm not fully familiar with his views, so I will definitely have to read your article. But the other thing that I noticed was that I don't know if you were following the NHL thing at all. I certainly don't follow the NHL. I'm not into any sports at all. But what I did see was a huge backlash to the NHL players who said, I'm sorry, I'm a Christian. I'm not going to participate in your Pride Night. Simple as, no big deal. People were screeching at the top of their lungs. It was really something to behold. And I was like, oh my gosh, is the NHL going to cave to this? Are they going to throw these players out for not participating in this? But what happened instead was more NHL players said, actually, I don't think I'm going to participate either. This is not in line with my personal values. And now the NHL, the organization, is saying, you know what? We're probably going to just not do Pride Nights at all. It's probably for the best. And I was thinking how true it is that courage is contagious.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that what Vivek is doing is going to have a similar effect on people. Now, I know that not many people have the kind of funds that he has, and that could obviously be a roadblock for some people. But if Vivek is running for president, then it's possible that you could run for city council, or you could run for any number of positions that could be well filled by a community minded, outspoken individual with the beliefs that you hold. So if
Mm-hmm.
he can do it, you probably can too. And I really, really have to say, I fully respect somebody who's willing to take a risk. Now, somebody who's been a CEO has taken a really big risk, and I know that people don't understand that much anymore. There's a lot of blame placed on CEOs where they don't seem to recognize the amount of risk it takes to start and run a company.
Mm-hmm.
And they tend to think that everybody has equal value at a company, and the individual employee should be paid as much as the person who literally risked their entire life and their life savings to start this company. Not the case. If you take an oversized amount of risk, you are perfectly entitled to expect an oversized amount of compensation. I think that's fair. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's how capitalism really wins, because they are incentivizing interesting thinkers, people who have great ideas for companies, and people who are willing to take risks. There's that degree of bravery that I think that we're really really lacking lately. I think that we focused more on safety, especially
Yeah.
following the pandemic, and there's really been much less of an emphasis on courage and doing daring things, and I think that's weakening us. Now, have you heard the old trope that hard times make strong men make good times make weak men. And if you have,
Mhm.
where do you think we are on that cycle?
We're definitely on the weak men point.
Yeah.
Um, and to use an example, I know the women who started Moms for Liberty,
Very cool.
and I think they're doing a great job with it. I fully support. I'll be at their summit this year. I was at their summit last year. They've amassed, was it over? I forgot how many. It was like over 10,000 members in a year. Um,
Wow.
so great success. They were just at Congress for that bill that went through the House. At least we'll see what happens in the Senate. Um, Tiffany Justice was there to give testimony, and
Was that the
so
school
there
choice bill?
was this, yes,
Okay.
yes,
Okay. That's
yeah,
what
the
I
the
parental
parental
rights. Yeah.
rights
Yeah.
bill, yeah, yeah. And these are regular women, regular moms who got up and created this organization and galvanized a whole bunch of mothers across the country. But my question is, where are the men?
Hmm.
You know, we saw all these viral videos. Only a handful of them involve fathers at at the school boards arguing with school board members about the success of their children. Where are the men?
Hmm.
And you know, I get it. The guys are out making the money or whatever.
Yeah. Busy. Yeah. I
But
understand.
at some point, a lot of these women are working too, yet they somehow find the time to go there to be involved in their kid's life. Um, and I think stuff like that, amongst other things, had me question the men of today, especially the fathers,
Hmm.
um, who are they stepping up? I know that there are definitely hurdles for the men that are out there too. So I don't ignore that. It's very complicated. Um,
Right.
it's not feminism's fault for everything. Does it play a part? Sure, absolutely. And I talk about those things too. But at some point, as a man, you have to fight for your children. And I had to live by that example too, because that's why I'm homeschooling my son and I'm trying my best to do something that I never thought I would actually need to do. And but when your son comes to you and says, I don't want to go back to that school, what kind of father would I be to say, well, you're going to go anyways?
Hmm. Yeah.
And, so I had to figure something out, and I had to protect my son. Um, so he has a successful life ahead of him. Um, and I just don't see enough men who are willing to stand up and fight for their children, at least in a public way.
Hmm.
Are there fathers that are highly involved? Yes, absolutely. But I don't know, just the image of men is tainted by the media for sure. But also, I just don't think there are enough men who are standing up and doing the right thing.
Interesting. So, do you think if there were a similar organization to Moms for Liberty, possibly, I don't know, maybe called something like Dads for Liberty, that
Hmm.
guys would have more an option to jump in? Do you think that they kind of need that opening? Do you think it's possible? Because I was thinking about this earlier today. I was like, where do I begin to influence the culture? How can I make that
Hmm.
happen? What's a really practical application of getting out there and encouraging people and really trying to push society toward a positive direction? And I was kind of stumped. I was like, you know what? This is one of those things I'm just going to have to think about for a little while. And I think it
Hmm.
starts. So, what I concluded was that it starts with kind of learning how to be friends with people. And that means putting yourself second when it comes to asking questions about their lives and trying to emphasize that you're very invested in what they're doing. And from there, you can build like a community of people. Ideally, in your case, it would probably be men. In my case, hopefully, I can link up with some of the Moms for Liberty, and then to kind of look around and say, all right, so we're going to go to school board meetings. We're going to do maybe library public readings, having our own story hours to kind of counter the drag queen story hour nonsense we've been seeing. We could also stage protests, but we could also have, like my friend Carrie Smith has held, conversational, I think she calls them civility dinners, where she
Hmm.
has just meetings of people who don't agree with each other on everything, and they
Right.
join and they break bread and they kind of discuss where they're coming from. And I think those are like really simple, really positive ways that we can affect society that aren't flashy. It's not getting up on stage in front of thousands of people and giving your 3-minute screed about why you think your side is right. It's much bigger than that, because it is at the end of the day. The ideas that conservatism holds are incredibly deep, very meaningful, very valuable, and if they're phrased appropriately, they have incredible power to change people's lives. And that
Right.
means affecting society. Now, I will say that I agree with you that we're going into the times of weak men, which are going to lead to hard times. Now, my silver lining is that our kids, your son, whenever my kids decide to turn up, are going to be incredibly strong people. And then they will
Hmm.
have the tools they need to make times good again. And I don't know if we can defeat the cycle of good times making weak men. I think that we need to fight for good times that aren't so good that they weaken people. I don't think
Right.
people understand that having everything really makes us soft. It makes us complacent and it makes us self-centered. And I think that every time I see one of these purple-haired leftists talking about their own pronouns, I was like, you know what fixes this? Even the slightest bit of hardship. And I finally reached a point where I'm like, it's time for some hardship. And I don't know what that's going to look like. It does look, to me, it feels heavy, the social stuff, but it doesn't feel that way to everyone. I think the economy is going to wake people up a lot. And I
Yeah.
sense that that's about to come down like a house of cards. But I will try to leave everyone on a positive note that I think the hard times are going to make our kids very much stronger. And hopefully that will have the effect of helping us angle our messaging to convince people that our values actually are good and help us live our values in a way that sets an example for other people. All right, Adam, where can people find you on Twitter? I see you have a couple handles. What do you want people to follow most of all?
At wrong_speak. That's my
Okay.
personal, and then at wrong speak pub, PUB, is for Wrong Speak Publishing. So you can follow that for different articles that we help to put out. We advocate for free speech, varying viewpoints from regular people who just want to be heard and just want a platform. So if anybody wants to write something for Wrong Speak, send it to submissions@wrongspeak.net. And we'll communicate with you. So it's been a great platform and experience to do that with WrongSpeak, and we have it on Substack.
Awesome. Love Substack. First of all, they're a huge free speech proponent, and I'm very optimistic for their future for sure. And I am very impressed by you building your own platform, kind of giving people voices. I think that's pivotal for kind of pushing society in the proper direction. So good on you for that. Appreciate that. Respect it. Thank you so much for joining us, Adam. I am looking forward to that New York Post article. In fact, as soon as you write it, I'm going to go back into the description of this video after we put it up, and I will put that in our links section so people can find it there if they're watching this later down the road. Do you know when that's going to be out?
Probably submitting it tomorrow.
Perfect.
So it'll be out tomorrow night.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, I will do that later. Again, thank you for joining us. And to all of you guys who stuck with us for all this time, thank you so much. I will see you all next time. Bye, guys.
Peace.
How's it going?